Welcome into the Hoosier Insider podcast. I'm Griffin Epstein, and we are almost at Indiana basketball season. It is November. Normally, Indiana fans, they'd start forgetting about Indiana football, focus on IU basketball, but of course, it's 2020. It's a little bit different this year. A lot of people still paying attention to Indiana football, but we got to start turning our attention to Indiana basketball. It's just a couple weeks from starting, and who better than to have on the Hoosier Insider podcast this week than Tyler Tachman. He is living, eating, breathing Indiana basketball this year, covering it for Inside the Hall. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing great. Excited to talk IU basketball with you. And for, as much excitement as Indiana football is getting, I think there's a lot of excitement around this Indiana basketball program, teetering up maybe on the edge of the top 25. There's always high expectations from this fan base, but is it reasonable to be excited about this team this year?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it really starts with a lot of excitement around the freshman class, especially with Christian Lander coming a year early, who was a five-star point guard, originally supposed to be in the 2021 class, but him coming a year early, I think, really just gave a little bit more of a sense of excitement, having him and Trace Jackson Davis on the court at the same time. And I think that this team has kind of everything that's necessary to win tournament games.
Now the schedule, I was hoping it'd be out by the time we talk. We're still waiting. As of Thursday, we're talking on November 5th. We do seem to have a pretty good idea, though. We know probably they're going to start against Tennessee Tech on November 25th. They're going to go to the Maui Invitational in North Carolina. Very strange, but it's 2020. Likely a Butler in the Crossroads Classic, and then a busy Big Ten schedule. It looks like a really hard schedule. Is that about right from what you're hearing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the Maui Invitational is going to be a test just really early in the season. They're opening against Providence, and they're going to have a good team. They have two transfers that'll be playing their first year at Providence. One of them is a forward who averaged 16 points a game at North Florida. The other is a transfer from St. Joseph's who averaged about 12 a game. So very early on after that game against Tennessee Tech, you're going to see Indiana be tested very quickly, and then past Providence in the Maui Invitational, they could get Texas, who has a very experienced backcourt with Andrew Jones, and they also have a five-star incoming forward, Greg Brown too. So you're not going to have these games with Troy. You're not going to have a bunch of these games with Eastern Illinois. It's going to be with the shortened schedule and just in the late start. It's just they're going to be really thrown into everything very quickly. So you're not going to have a lot of time to get adjusted. And I think that might not be good for the guys like Christian Lander and the other freshmen, because you just don't have those games to get acclimated to the speed of the college game. But it'll be apparent very quickly what type of shape this team is in.
A big focus last year and into the offseason was talking about the offense and specifically who would play, and obviously some changes in the program with Devontae Green and Deron Davis graduating, and then Justin Smith, who had some of the most minutes last year, transferring out. A lot of people saying, they want to see Archie Miller speed up the offense, go a little bit smaller. What impact could that have, and should IU fans expect that for Archie Miller to maybe make those changes this year?
Yeah, that's one thing that he's talked about a lot over the summer and at media day is possibly playing that three guard lineup, and I think that's something that frustrated a lot of people last year, is having Justin Smith at the three, and what that does is when he's on the wing, he's not a threat to shoot at all. So you have the defenders can sag off, can provide extra help on drivers, so that it really kind of closes up the offense a little bit. And he talked about having that three guard lineup this year. And what that'll do is just spread the floor more. It'll allow more room for Trace Jackson Davis to do work inside, for Joey Brunk to do work inside. And then it'll open up driving lanes for Al Durham, Rob Finney, Christian Lander. And the thing that I look at as a really big key, something that Archie Miller mentioned, was that this idea of the assist to turnover ratio really needing to be something that's improved this year. Something that really stuck out to me was that in the Archie Miller tenure at Indiana, no one's averaged more than 3.5 assists. And that's why you see these kind of stagnant offense that we saw. We either go 3, 4, 5 minutes that happen time and time again, is just because they don't have anyone that can really make an impact off the dribble, and they're just all too bunched up together. So I think something that really needs to be focused on this year is just being able to share the ball, move the ball, and having guys that can make plays off the dribble. And I think having a smaller lineup could really help that.
It seemed part of the excitement with getting Christian Lander and having him reclassify was because he was maybe that playmaker that, could bring up the offense. And as you mentioned, Indiana, I believe, was the only team in the Big Ten last year to average more turnovers than assists per possession, which is not a good stat to have for your offense. Lander's only 17, right? Or is he 18? I mean, really young.
Yeah, he just turned 18. When he came on
right.
campus, he was 17. So yeah, he's extremely young.
Is it reasonable to expect to see him in the starting lineup and making plays to rev up this offense, or is it going to, take some time over the course of the season? Because, I couldn't step out and make a shot in front of 17,000 fans, and he's 2 years younger than us, Tyler.
Yeah. I mean, I do an okay job at the intramural center, and in assembly hall at a big stage. Like I might need some time for that. But for him, I think there is a lot of expectations, very high expectations. And Archie Miller has talked about saying, we need to give him time. He's very young, just kind of like you were saying. And I think it'll be something to where, especially with like I said, how little kind of competition he'll get to ease into the college game, is that maybe the first half of the season you're not going to see him make a huge impact. It might take him some time. It'll take him some reps. It'll take him some mistakes, a lot of turnovers, before maybe he has those huge breakout games where he's just dusting everyone on the court and making people fall and dunking on people. So I think that it's not necessarily realistic to think right out of the gate he's going to be doing that type of stuff that he was doing in high school. But I think maybe midway through the season, I think that's a realistic timetable to where you see him really get adjusted to the college game and really become a really high impact player, especially into the tournament, which is where they would really need him.
Let's talk a little bit about Trayce Jackson-Davis. He was such a fun player to watch last year and had some moments, I thought, where, it was very clear that he can play in the NBA and he made professional moves, but he wasn't always, a consistent dominant player. He's came back for a sophomore year, getting a lot of accolades. Should we expect him to maybe take a step forward and, be a candidate for Big Ten Player of the Year right up there with Luka Garza, and potentially, be a first round draft pick next spring?
I think for this team to reach their full potential, that's what he's going to need to do. I think he's going to need to take a significant step, and two of the main things that he really needed to focus on in the offseason was finishing with his right hand. We all know as a southpaw, he's very strong finishing with his left hand. And the other aspect too is just adding a jump shot. Just maybe not even really needing to rely on it at all, but just to keep the defense honest to where he can throw up a pump fake, jab step, then go past the defender, to where they don't have to sit back on the block and wait for him to start backing him down. But to take that next step to go to the NBA, especially in the modern game where it's a lot of stretch fours and even centers that can make threes, I think he needs to at least show some improvement to where they have to respect it. But I mean, overall, yeah, I mean, I think he needs to be a third team All-American by the end of the season, somewhere up in that ranks, first team Big Ten for sure, something like that.
You mentioned three-pointers, and that was another aspect of Indiana's game that besides when Devontae Green went off, and obviously he's gone now, they really struggled to make threes. Jerome Hunter is a name that we've heard a lot in the offseason, that maybe he's the player to step forward and really be a three-point threat. Who on Indiana would you hope that can help stretch that floor and make big threes? Because it's basketball is a three-point shooting game today.
I mean, I think there's a lot of different guys. I think it's just a matter of who's going to step up. Like you said, Jerome Hunter, he's a guy that definitely he didn't shoot up to his potential last year, still getting acclimated to the college game in his redshirt freshman season. I think another guy is Armond Franklin. He's thrown into the starting lineup at the start of last season. He does have a pretty good shooting stroke. Didn't really show it much last year. And then if you look at the freshman, Anthony Leal has been known as a lockdown shooter from Bloomington South High School, and also Trey Galloway can shoot it a little bit. Dealt with some wrist issues in high school that hindered his abilities, but I think if you look at those guys, to me, are kind of the wild cards. Armond Franklin, Jerome Hunter, Anthony Leal, Trey Galloway. It's like if you can get those guys going, then you can really be dangerous because you got to assume that you need Al Durham to shoot well, and you need Rob Finney. He shot 37% last year, and as a lead guard on this team, whether you're shooting layups or 3-pointers, that's just not going to cut it. So I think you really need to rely on Al Durham and Rob Finney, and then those kind of wild card guys like Jerome Hunter, Armond Franklin, Anthony Leal, and Trey Galloway. You need at least one or two of them to really show that they have that shot making ability on a consistent basis.
We haven't mentioned defense yet, and I think I'm part of it was obviously a positive note for IU last year. What's the focus this year for Archie Miller's squad to continue improving that defense? When you look across the talent at the Big Ten this year, from Luka Garza at Iowa to Ayo DeSumo at Illinois, there's some really dangerous shot makers that Indiana's going to have to face a lot, especially with almost entirely a Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, I think some of that comes with physical maturity, and something that I think Trace has worked on in the offseason is just getting stronger. Because he said in the middle of Big Ten season, I mean, you just take a beating when you get guys like Luka Garza and Daniel Arturu the next night. I mean, it's just a gauntlet. And then this season, they've had some conference schedules come out, but they haven't released the Big Ten. Some of the conference schedules are going back to back days, and they're playing the same team. So, I mean, if you're playing Luka Garza 2 nights in a row, you're going to have to be able to have that conditioning and strength to be able to put up with that beating. I think that's where Cliff Marshall, Indiana's strength and conditioning coach, could really come into play. And I think another big aspect of that, when you're talking about Christian Lander, is his ability to get strong and really be physically ready. Because I think one of his big weaknesses right now is like we were saying, how he's so young, is that he's not quite at the physical level as guys that he could be guarding like Ayo DeSumo. So when I look at the defensive side, I think it has a lot to do with that kind of physical ability and really being in good condition, and the work that the guys have done over the summer on their own. And I think the other part is just really having cohesiveness. I think that's just always something that you need to have: cohesiveness and just being able to talk to each other, and just having that communication, really.
We still don't know the schedule as of today, and we also don't know whether there's going to be any fans at all in arenas in the Big Ten. Obviously, if there are any, it's going to be not a large amount. And last year, one of the big storylines for Indiana was they were graded Assembly Hall, which is normal, one of the toughest places to play in the country, 15-4, but they were just awful on the road. Just 2-8, and those 2 wins were against Nebraska and Minnesota, 2 of the bottom feeder teams in the Big Ten. Is that an opportunity? Maybe Indiana can be more consistent on the road this year, where they're going to either be playing in front of no fans or very few. How does that storyline pay out specifically for IU?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious answer is that it's going to hurt IU at home, just because the Assembly Hall crowd is such a boost, and it just makes it such a difficult place to play. But to me, it almost seems like a positive, because if I remember correctly, I think Indiana was 3-0 in neutral site games last year. So if you don't have fans at these Big Ten games, it's almost going to turn it into a neutral site game, which Indiana did fairly well at last year. So I, I mean, it's really hard to judge, but I think that it might not be the worst possible thing if you don't have to go into a state, with Michigan State, or atmosphere at Michigan. And if they can perform to that same level that they did at neutral site games like the Crossroads Classic, like they did at Madison Square Garden against UConn, against Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament, I think that it might not necessarily be the worst possible thing for Indiana.
It's now the fourth year of Archie Miller's tenure at Indiana. Still hasn't made an NCAA tournament, obviously, last year. Probably would have after they beat Nebraska on that Wednesday night before everything was shut down. What does he need to do this year to satisfy the fan base, to satisfy the athletic department, and kind of make his position secure? Because I wouldn't say he's on the hot seat, but it doesn't feel like he's established the program in a sense that the fan base is ready to fully buy in.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at this team, they have experience in the front court. They have experience in the back court. I think that this team, it's a disappointment if they don't make the NCAA tournament. They have to make the NCAA tournament at this point. They have plenty of pieces to make that happen. When I look at what the ceiling is, the highest potential, I think they could be a Sweet 16 team. And it just comes down to a lot of those kind of wild cards, like I was talking about. Like, what are you going to get out of Armond Franklin and Jerome Hunter? Can they take a very big step from last year? Can Trace Jackson Davis live up to that All-American and All Big Ten preseason accolades? And I mean, I think that's what it really comes down to with those guys, whether they can make that significant step up. Can Race Thompson, also who came on at the end of last season, can he take a big step? So I think that they have all the pieces in play. It's just a matter of all of them taking just a little bit of a step forward, which I think you need to see every year out of a team, but we haven't really seen necessarily out of Indiana the last couple of years.
Gonna put you on the spot here, Tyler, and ask you some more big picture questions, keys to the season. What if you're looking at this Indiana team, and we've discussed different aspects and different issues last year? What is the number one thing that you're looking for, especially early in the year, that will signal how high the ceiling of this team is, as you just said?
Yeah, I think that it's avoiding those long droughts without scoring, because to me last year that was a huge concern when you just go 4 or 5 minutes without being able to change what you're doing, to be able to kind of regroup. I think good teams are obviously going to have times where they won't be successful on offense, where they're going to give up some buckets on defense, but it's those sustained patterns when you see them over and over again making the same mistakes. So when you kind of say, what am I looking for early in the season? It's maybe, to me, I'm looking for I know they're going to make mistakes the first couple of games of the season, but then it turns into, okay, 2 games later, are they going to make that same mistake? Are they going to keep shooting forced threes? Are they going to keep forcing passes, or are they going to show growth in just that little bit of time?
When you look at this team, obviously you get a mix of experience and some young talent coming in. What is the number one strength that you would say that IU, especially late in a close game, could potentially use it to pull out a victory? And they're going to play a lot of close games in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of an intangible, something that's not really a number thing, but it's just the experience. I mean, no one's played an NCAA tournament, but they certainly have all been in big games. I mean, having a guy like Al Durham that's really been through a lot at the IU program, having him as someone that you can lean on, being a leader. Same with Rob Finney. Just having those guys handling the ball in late game situations, I think could be really beneficial for Indiana. And then down low, Joey Brunk, his 5th year in college. He's been to Butler, been at Indiana now, going into his 2nd year. So in those late game situations, being able to lean on the guys that have been there, that are getting, as we've seen Race Thompson be more vocal this season, I think that's just going to be a huge thing for Indiana that maybe we haven't seen the last couple of years.
Flip it around, there's there were a lot of issues last year. What is the biggest weakness that concerns you this year that potentially could keep Indiana out of the tournament?
Yeah, I think it's 3-point shooting, just poor shooting in general. They shot, I mean, it was bad last year. And I think that if you're gonna go with that kind of guard-oriented lineup, you have to shoot well from threes, because if not, then they can go to a zone and pack it in, and then you take away Trace Jackson Davis's impact, because he's surely going to be seeing more double teams. I mean, teams are going to be game planning specifically for him with all the attention he's getting coming back after a phenomenal freshman season. But I mean, I think that it comes down to them being able to make threes on a consistent basis, and keep the defense moving, because then that's just going to open up the whole offense in terms of, then you can throw in pump fakes and driving lanes, and if you're going to have guards on the floor, you have Christian Lander creating, then if you put him in a pick and roll with Trace Jackson Davis, then if Armond Franklin is shooting good from the outside, he's in the corner, you can't sag off of him at all. And then you get a little two-man game going. Trace can go to work down low. And I think that just being able to shoot from three is just going to be a huge key this season.
I think obviously Trace Jackson Davis is the most important player on this team, but you're always looking for that breakout player, maybe someone we're not talking about. I think last year in the preseason, a lot of people thought it was going to be Demezi A. Anderson. I mean, that did not work out. Really did not work out. Obviously, he transferred out of the program now at Loyola Chicago. Who's maybe a player this year that can actually be a breakout player and really make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say there's two different guys. I'd say Race Thompson and Jerome Hunter. Jerome Hunter's in the same class that came in with Romeo Langford. He was the second highest recruit that came in with him. Top 50 guy, just, you know, even seen as a guy that could have been a two and done. And then he had the leg injury in his true freshman season and ended up redshirting it. And then last year was just a lot about him trying to reteach himself the game after not playing for a year, and really trying to get used to the college level. And we didn't really see the Jerome Hunter that many did see in high school. So if he's able to return to that form, to where what I'm looking for him is being able to shoot, number one, but the other one is being aggressive driving. It seemed like a lot last year he would kind of maybe take a hard dribble or two and then kind of back out of the lane. But if you see him flying down the lane and dunking it, then it's like, then that's that Jerome from that mixtape on, in high school. Like that's back to his old form. So I'd say Jerome and then Race Thompson. People have talked a lot about his ability to grow as a leader. He's been a lot more vocal. Now it's his fourth year in the program. He's also redshirted his freshman year. And there was just a lot over the summer about him expanding his game, being able to shoot it a little bit, working on his handling abilities. And now with Deron Davis and Justin Smith gone, you have that three-man rotation down low with him, Joey Brunk, and Trace. And I think that he needs to be a guy that's going to step up and really be able to act as that counterpart to Trace if Joey's inconsistent again.
Now, two definitely exciting players for Indiana. And before we have you make some season predictions, but one thing I know you've been covering a lot with Inside the Hall, especially the last couple months, has been recruiting, and been a little bit weird that we've been in our recruiting dead period since March. But Trey Kaufman, who Indiana had a target on, was in his final five, picked Purdue last week instead of Indiana. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of options now left in this 2021 recruiting class. Obviously has Logan Duncombe, but hasn't signed anyone else. Where is Indiana recruiting right now for 2021 looking for Archie Miller?
Yeah, losing Trey is obviously not ideal for him. I think it came down to Matt Painter telling him that he can play the three, and it didn't seem like Archie Miller was willing to let him kind of have that guarantee. But I think the two guys that are the obvious targets are Mason Miller, who's a power forward, son of Mike Miller, who's a former NBA player. He's got a very versatile game, can shoot it. Not as physically developed as Trey Kaufman, but he's a top 100 player. A guy that Indiana's been going after hard. I think having Duncombe will help in the paint, but you're talking about possibly losing Trace and Joey after this year. So you're going to need to reload. And so I think Mason Miller is a huge guy to really add some more depth down low. And the second guy is Aminu Muhammad. He's a 5-star shooting guard. dude is quick. He can shoot. Just loads of talent. And that's someone who Indiana has been really going after hard as well. And could really, I think, be an impact guy right off getting on campus. So I think those are the two guys that Indiana really needs to turn to right now.
There's a lot of question marks in the Big Ten. We see a lot of the top players return. Illinois, Iowa retooling, but Maryland basically lost their entire roster from last year. Who are you seeing is going to be the contenders in the Big Ten? And is it going to be as deep as it was last year? Because, I mean, last year they were going to get, it looked like either 10 or 11 teams into the NCAA tournament, which was really unprecedented for the Big Ten.
Yeah, my kind of top tier teams. I think Wisconsin has a great chance to win the Big Ten. They tied for the share of the Big Ten last year, and I mean they're returning essentially everyone, and they were just very steady. I mean you can always count on their defense, but they have Demetric Trice, the veteran guard, returning, and I think they could be an extremely tough team. And then obviously Iowa with Luka Garza. And you have a bunch of guys coming back with them, also including Jordan Bohannon, excuse me, who is a lights out shooter, sat out last year with an injury. And then also Illinois, I see them up top too, with Kofi Coburn, who is the beat Trace Jackson Davis out for the Big Ten Player of the Year, Conference Player of the Year, for freshman Conference Player of the Year last year, and then Ayo Dosunmu as well. And then I think that the teams like Michigan State, Michigan, and Rutgers, they're all going to be near the top. Michigan State obviously losing Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman, huge losses, but they do have Rocket Watts and Gabe Brown returning. They have some pieces also with Joshua Langford. And then Michigan's also kind of retooling as well with losing Xavier Simpson and John Teskey. But I mean, overall, you did see a lot of moving parts. But I think as a conference, they're going to all have guys that are going to step up, and I think it can be that same kind of very deep conference again. Because like you were mentioning, Maryland kind of sinking to the bottom of the projections of many different places. But I mean, they still have a lot of experience, especially guards. So I mean, they could be a sleeper to kind of move up towards the middle of the conference. So I think that, outside of maybe Nebraska and Northwestern, and there's a lot of different teams that can make some noise.
All right, I'm going to have you make some predictions. It's such a tough schedule. We said probably looking at 25 of 27 games being in that so-called Power Six, counting the Big East in that. They'll have to play Butler in the Crossroads Classic. How many wins do you expect Indiana to have, and where in that conference standings do you expect Indiana to fall? They were 11th last year in the Big Ten in the regular season, but of course it was so deep that wasn't necessarily an awful position to be in.
Yeah, I think realistically, around the middle of the pack in the Big Ten for Indiana. I think that's a realistic expectation. Just kind of depending on how those wild cards shake up, and how quickly Christian Lander can get used to the game at the college level, and what type of jump Trace Jackson Davis makes. And they could, possibly be, top 4, top 5 team in the Big Ten if everything turns out well. But I mean, like you were saying before, it's just going to be an extremely tough schedule, where, I mean, I think it could turn out in being, 10 teams make the NCAA tournament. So, especially with the not as many non-conference games, it's going to be harder to judge the teams, based on just the conference schedule. But I mean, I think it's, like I was saying before, definitely a team that should make the NCAA tournament without a question.
So I gotta hold you to something. Do they make the NCAA tournament this year? It's been 4 years. That's the longest time Indiana basketball has not been in the NCAA tournament since Bob Knight. Did they end that this year?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make that bold prediction and say yes. I don't know if is it bold or not. I don't.
They haven't done it in so long. At this point, it's bold, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen this year in a lot of aspects. So
yeah, so I'm saying yes. Yep, they're gonna make the tournament.
All right, and last prediction for you: what do they make a run in the NCAA tournament? And at the end of the year, are fans finally kind of I don't think Indiana basketball fans will ever be satisfied, but are they at least content with Archie Miller and the direction of the program when March comes to a close?
Yeah, I believe that they will be. Like I was saying before, I think it's a team that could possibly get to the Sweet 16, which I mean, I'm sure that all fans would see that as a win. And I mean, this is the first year that every recruit has been Archie Miller's guys. So this is when you really get to the point of this is Archie Miller's program now. There's not really much left from Tom Crean. He did recruit Al Durham and Race Thompson, but Archie was able to have them, stay. Was able to convince them. So I mean, I think he's not on the hot seat, but kind of like last year, a big turning point, and to really seeing, is this going to be a Archie Miller that's going to stick around for maybe one more year, or is he going to get that extension? So yeah, I think that it's definitely a team that could make some noise, and I think fans probably will be happy by the end of the year.
It's going to be a really interesting season. Indiana basketball is always a roller coaster with plenty of ups and downs. Indiana fans certainly hoping for more ups and downs this season. And Tyler, really appreciate you coming on, bringing in your insight. I know you're having a busy day today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to go get some shots up now. So thank you.
All right. Good luck. And maybe we'll see you at Assembly Hall, either covering the team or maybe they'll sign you. I don't know. If you get some more shots up, we'll see.
Yeah, possibly.
Anyways, that will do it today for the Hoosier Insider podcast. We're going to be back in a couple of weeks to talk Indiana women's basketball, which also has a lot of excitement. But while you wait for more episodes, as always, you can check out all the Hoosier Insider episodes wherever you get your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hoosier Insider. You can follow me on Twitter at Epstein Griffin, and definitely follow Tyler on Twitter if you want Indiana basketball updates. He's at T15, I think. You can search his name, you'll find it. Does a great job working for Inside the Hall. For Tyler Tachman, I'm Griffin Epstein. Thanks so much for listening to the Hoosier Insider podcast. We'll talk to you again real soon.